Welcome back to another episode of Truth Seekers, along with Coach Nick and myself, Coach Josh. We have Scott joining us today for a thrilling discussion. I know it's going to be thrilling. I can see into the future on leadership. I love this topic. I was thinking about this earlier. Nick, maybe if I could get your thoughts right off the bat here about leadership. I was trying to think of, first of all, we kind of have to qualify, well, at least in my mind, who's worthy of leadership. A lot of people out there want to be leaders or want to fill those shoes. And to me, the point I got to is that you have to be okay, not only okay, but excel in your own skin to be able to set the example for other people. I'd like you to maybe try to roll off of that. What do you think of that to start out with?
I think leadership is it's a bigger conversation uh, than perhaps just thinking about it in terms of leading people in an organization or a business. We know that you can't. We talk about management and leadership. You can't manage people. You can only lead people. You can't tell people what to do. At least not for very long before they go crazy and don't do it and leave. But I think leadership is more of like it's a I think it's almost a way of living. It's like it's doing things that there's an integrity component of it. It's moving towards the life that you want, leading yourself first, and if you can't do that, then you can't lead anyone else. Creating a version of you that you want to create the abundance that you might like in your life, and when you do that, you create more for other people. That's what really jumps out for me there. Your thoughts, Scott?
Yeah, so I couldn't agree more. When I think about what from the experiences in my life, the definition of leadership is, it has a lot to do with being able to make decisions with very small pieces of information, and not being afraid to take the calculated risk, and just being the one at the helm, and having some sort of definitive clarity on where the world is going, knowing full well that 90% of the information you need to really make that decision may not be at hand yet. But I also believe that the world favors the people who are more proactive and are willing to charge forward in that regard. And you know, a lot of that is what defines leadership for me. I also feel strongly that you don't have to have all the answers to be a great leader. And people who do definitively say, this is right, and this is the path, I think it's a short-lived leadership in many regards, because most of us, to your point, Nick, most of us know that time's going to run out on you always being right. And so for my style of leadership, I've taken a firm path, and I did this a lot with the NC Health Innovators. That's now my nonprofit, Launch Tower Health. Is I don't know what all the right answers are to make Charlotte fertile ground for healthcare entrepreneurship, but I'm also not going to let that stop me from going after it and trying. And when you're definitive like that with regard to, we're going to make this work. I can't tell you all the steps I'm going to take to get there, but I believe we all kind of do it together. This will happen. And ultimately, that old adage of, managers have direct reports, but leaders have followers. Like people followed. With Launch Tower Health, we had Novant followed and jumped on board. North Carolina followed and jumped on board. Premier jumped on board. And those are exciting things as a leader, to know that you didn't have all the answers, and your honesty really helped, solidify your position as a leader in that regard.
It's almost part of it, right? It's like almost part of the fun of it. It's like, well, of course I haven't got the answers, and if I did have the answers, I don't want to play this game anyway, because it's already won. It's like it's already defined. And I think that it's then the other side of that is that it just gives the ultimate freedom. It's like, I'm not here to tell you what the answers are here. I'm going on this journey. Do you want to jump on and come with me? That's all. And at every turn, we'll figure it all out together. And I'm just going to know that whatever I do is the right thing in the moment. It's all part of the journey. And I'm just going to like charge forward, like you said, charge forward, Scott, and just go to where I'm going to go. And this is where I want to go. And we're going to take one step in front of the other and go there. And you know what? Like if you've got all the answers, then probably you're not at that leadership level that's available. Like there's probably another level that's available, and I'm sure there's another level that available where I'm at. But it's interesting to think about, like if you think that if you've got all the answers, then you probably haven't, right? Or at least you're just not answering the right questions, right?
So
Playing inside the box.
is humility the word then? Like a sense of humility that maybe you don't know everything. Like if you approach every situation, like I got the answer for this, I already know, then I don't know if people are attracted to that because they inherently know that they don't have the answer. So if they put themselves in your shoes, then you can't possibly know every answer.
Right.
I think it's that approaching the situation with that humility that at least garners the respect from other people to give the space for them to follow.
Yeah.
I love that quote that you mentioned, Scott. Managers have direct reports, leaders have followers. That's amazing because it kind of it implies that like if you want to take somebody or something and grab it and pull it with you, it's going to resist. But if you create the space for them to basically set an example for how to act or how to behave, people are just drawn to that.
Yeah, I used to love to when our daughters were smaller. They're 8 and 11 now, but I would get them in the pool when they were tiny, and I could run, backwards on the pool and just have them like follow in my draft. And I was, leading in the water. I was like
Right.
physically, to your point, kind of creating that momentum and that void. And they didn't have to do anything, but just lay there, and they would follow with me. And I think there's probably something to that same concept that leader is there to, kind of be that leading edge who's taking a lot of heat on the one side, but is also creating the wake and the draft that allows other people who don't have the stamina, the courage, the intensity, the energy to be able to take all that heat on the side. And they've got maybe even less visibility to some of those issues than the people who are looking the other direction have, right?
Yep.
And you're just able to kind of to create that momentum and that energy. I think humility is absolutely something you have to have, but it's more than just the humility, because you can't, as a leader, you also can't have none of the answers, right? You've got to have something that people feel there's energy there, and there's something for me to get behind, something for me to follow, because inevitably really good leaders have super smart people behind them that, like, I hate being the smartest person in the room. It's the last place I like to be.
Worst room otherwise, yeah.
Yeah. So I want smarter people around me that can also help to propel that ship forward, and that absolutely takes humility to be able to be that person that doesn't want to be the smartest person in the room.
It's like having the answer versus having an answer. I think that's the distinction that came out for me with you saying that. It's like, if you've got no answer, then you're not powering forward, right? It's just like, well, I don't know. Then that's the opposite of leading, right? It's like, that's just having humility without having the certainty to back it up. It's like, you need that humility. Otherwise, if you haven't got it, it's like, I've got the answer, then you're stuck in a box because you can only go in that box. I've got the answer for this box, but there's an unlimited amount of questions and an unlimited amount of boxes. So it's like, well, I've got an answer right now. Do you want to go with that? Or more specifically, this is the answer we're going with right now. Come on, let's go. And everyone's in your wake, versus being, in your example, Scott, being on the side of the pool and saying to your daughters, go swim on the other side of it, right? Go swim.
Right.
And they're like, you can't see what I can see, Dad. Like, it's deep. Come on. It's long. You're like, don't worry about it. Go for it, right? It's a very different thought process, right? And I often think about leadership as being zoomed in and zoomed out, or having the ability to be zoomed out when you need to be. Like, can I see the right level of the right zoom? Am I close enough in? Am I too close in? Am I far enough out? Happened a lot this year as well, with people that are seeing the impact of like the environment that we're all living in right now. And are you seeing it either as something that's a threat that's going to kill things immediately, so you need to just basically save what you have, or are you just seeing it as a blip in the longer term view of the next 5-10 years? And if it's the secondary one, and you're thinking about like just a blip, it's like, well, actually everything's an opportunity more than it would be before. It's kind of like when the stock market goes down based on an event in the environment, there's nothing happening necessarily to those companies, so those stocks are effectively on sale. So the smart person goes and buys extra amounts of those ones that are on sale, because while everyone else is scared and selling them, he knows that in 5 years' time that you're going to double your profit. And I think that's a big constituent of leadership for me as well, is just being able to see the right term, like thinking about that in that vision. And that's why it allows, I think, a leader to make those decisions around having an answer in the moment, because it's just like, it doesn't matter right now what happens this week, but can we have an answer that's going to move us towards where we want to be? Is it putting us in the general direction we want to be? Let's just move forward.
Yeah, well, that notion of perspective, I think, is one that's really important in strong leadership, to know that there are problems that need you nose to the grindstone and neck deep in statistics. Right. And then there are other problems that require you to kind of back out and say, if I'm only tackling the problem that is immediately in front of my face, I'm missing what plans we need to be putting in motion to be 5 years, 10 years out in front of this. Yep. And being smart enough, and maybe I'll keep coming back to, being, your humility word, Josh, having the humility to know that I've got to have those different layers of perspective. And if I'm only down in the weeds, then I can't stand up to realize that we're getting ready to run off a cliff with this thing. And it makes me think a lot of what I'm doing with Roamed. Roamed is an international healthcare technology company based here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we work with membership-based medicine physicians. These medicine-based medicine physicians are leaders in the primary care space, and they have the visibility into, or the vision into the existing primary care infrastructure that exists today, where we have this fee-for-service model. This model where a primary care doctor has to take care of 3,000 patients in his or her panel in order to make their financial engine run. And they saw that and said, this is flawed, this is broken, we have to go create a new model. And I don't necessarily have the visibility into what it should be or ought to be, but I know what we've got is wrong. Right. And so that's what they've done, and they've charged off, and they've created what we call the intersection of consumerism and healthcare. And these are physicians who are now also entrepreneurs. They left the safety net of some of these larger health systems, larger, private practices, to go do their own thing. And it's making healthcare better here in the States and abroad, that those physicians, chose to also be really strong leaders in what that care model needs to be. I have to bring everything back to healthcare because it's the only thing that I've ever done. The only thing that I'm going to do. So I've got 1,000 different angles that we can go around healthcare on this leadership front as well.
Well, do you know what I love? One of the things that really makes me smile, Scott, and for you, Coach, as well. I find that all the things we're doing here around leadership, around personal development, around coaching, I think for me, that's why I love it so much, is it's a foundation. And I think all of us are doing that in our own rights. And so it's just whatever your chosen field or vehicle is. And for you, Scott, obviously that's healthcare. But all of these things stay in place. Like, I'm going to use all these concepts. And I'm passionate about healthcare, so I'm going to push into that area, and that's where I want to make my play. That's where I'm going to make my impact. That's where I'm going to help people. Yeah. And for me, it's the foundation of actually doing the work around creating that everywhere and dispersing that. But I just find it so fascinating, because it's kind of like sports. Like, we all know that, like, being active is good for us, our body, it's good for our minds. And so it doesn't really matter which sport you play. It's just pick the one that you'll do. It's like, if you really like hockey, go play it, and you know that you'll do it. Go play a bunch of hockey. If you don't like hockey, but it's really important to exercise, don't do it. Like, do something else, because you won't follow through. So it's just pick your vehicle. Like the outcome and the concepts and the principles are the same. Just whatever you need to get to where you want to be, and that's you can just excel anywhere. Like you apply the principles. That's why it's so beautiful. Like,
Yeah.
So to that point, Scott, why healthcare? Why is that the vehicle?
Well, that's an interesting story. The way I got into it is one story. The way I fell in love with it is a completely different one. I was actually interviewing, and I'm from Central Ohio originally, and was interviewing to go to business schools. And I met with the dean of the business school at Ohio Northern University, and he said, "Scott, your grades are pretty good. You should really go to the pharmacy school here at ONU instead of going to business." I'm like, this is the dean of the business college telling me to go to pharmacy school? Here's the deal. Your grades are so good. If you start in pharmacy and don't like it, come back here and I'll graduate you in 4 years. But if you start in business and want to try pharmacy, you will never get caught up. And so I've had the chance to tell Terry Maris on multiple occasions since then, the path, it was a 30-minute meeting on his calendar on some random 1994 afternoon. And he set me on a completely different course that allowed me to meet my wife and build a lifetime's worth of friends. And so that's how I got started on my healthcare journey. The reason that I've absolutely stuck with it as I got into that and became a practicing pharmacist and took care of patients in hospitals, I saw that there were so many things that my entrepreneurial brain could fix. And I had a different vision on how these things needed to work and could operate. The ability to take things that other people didn't see that needed to work together, that really should be working together. And so I see healthcare as this vehicle that needs a ton of support, that needs really strong stewards to not take advantage of healthcare, because I think it's very susceptible to doing that. And much like you use the kind of the leadership platform that, it doesn't matter whether you're an engineer, an electrician, or what that is, leadership rules apply. Healthcare, whether you're a physician, a pharmacist, a nurse, or none of those, we are all consumers of healthcare. Every single one of us,
right?
Every level. And whether you're actually being the one consuming it, or a significant other, or a child, or a parent, or an aunt, or an uncle, we're all consuming the healthcare system. And the standards that we've set, and I guess not even set, the standards we've accepted in healthcare, we don't accept anywhere else in our lives, right?
Yeah.
So I'll give you one example. This is one of my favorites. And you guys are going to have to shut me down because I can talk and talk and talk. Totally down with the gift of gab. So one story. So if restaurants work the way that healthcare did, here's how a restaurant, I can counter what happened. So you would go have dinner. The three of us would go sit down and have dinner, right? We'd go to one of my favorite restaurants here in Charlotte, Custom Shop. And what would happen is we'd sit down and the waitress would come and give us menus. There would be no prices anywhere on the menu. We would order, we would get drinks from the bar, the food and drinks would come, we would eat, we would get up and just walk out, right? We wouldn't pay for anything. 3-4 weeks later, we'd get a letter in the mail that was from the insurance company, right? You can see where the analogy is getting tied in here.
Sure.
It looks like a bill, but it's not. It would say, don't pay this, right? It's just this random explanation of what you had for dinner. Okay, great. Then a couple weeks later, you would actually get the bill from the restaurant that was, oh my gosh, $4,000. Why did I get the $4,000 steak? I wish I would have known it was a $4,000 steak. I can't afford a $4,000 steak. I would have gotten a $3 cheeseburger, right? Instead, but there's no prices anywhere. So I couldn't really make an informed decision on what I was going to buy. Well, that's not the end of the story, because a couple weeks later, I get another bill from the bartender, who was an independent contractor, who wasn't actually employed by the restaurant. And so, like, I don't know if the money I gave to the restaurant was actually covering for the bartender. And by the way, I never even saw the bartender, right? The bartender's the radiologist. So, like, it's when you start to take healthcare standards for those types of things and apply them to common scenarios, it's completely blasphemous.
Yeah.
Like, a restaurant would never operate like that. We would never go back to that restaurant. ever again. And of course, it's not the way that it works. But as consumers, it happens exactly that way in healthcare. And we're like, oh, it's healthcare. I guess this is normal. Well, it shouldn't be at all.
Yeah.
So those are some of the problems I think can be fixed in the healthcare world. And I'm trying to be a good steward of some of those things.
Yeah, it's cool. So cool. I mean, look, it's a reminder we get what we tolerate, right? Like you said, it's not the standard we set. We accept it, and that's just the way it is, right? But that's not good enough. It's time for a change.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
I so appreciate that analogy, Scott, because
Cool.
I think I speak for a lot of people who will be watching this. Like, please solve that problem. That is something that is just, oh my God, you hit so many nerves there with what you're talking about. But I relate that to kind of Nick's stock market example with, and I wrote this down, so let me know if this resonates with you guys. Then we can slowly start to wrap up here. But inherent in leadership, I think, is conviction and maybe even in uncertain times. So you talk about the stock market example, Nick, like the market is down. Like when the market is down, things are on fire. People are, getting out, dropping left and right. To your point, that opportunity, that conviction within that uncertain time is getting in at that point. And to Scott's example, it's like recognizing that we're in that uncertain, time with healthcare, and there's so much opportunity. There's opportunity in those uncertain times. And I think that leadership is that conviction during that time. Does that resonate with you guys?
Yeah, it really does. And like what jumps out for me is kind of like people think, well, how do you have conviction when it's uncertain? But the point is, it's not about having conviction when you're certain. It's about uncertain. It's about having it all the time anyway. Because if you have the right level of awareness and certainty around the decisions you're making when things are good, when things are bad, it's just obvious what to do. It's not a new calculation to make. If you've bought a stock because you know it's going in the right direction, because it's a good company, then you still believe that to be true when the stock market's down because of something else prevailing in the environment. You don't have to pull that from yourself in that moment. It's just like following through on what you already know. You've already practiced. You've already built that muscle. You've got it to go.
So is that a balance, Nick, with like humility and conviction? It's almost like that's a game that's, ever balancing.
I think it's on the scale, right? I think it's like, okay, look, here's my conviction. This is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm not completely convinced. I'm also open that I could be completely wrong. And that's okay because I'm not going to grow otherwise. And so I'm going to do it with certainty because that's where I get my best result. And once I get the result, then I'll see whether I need to change and flex for the next time so I can have an even better result.
Well, I think the other thing that's inherent in that too is this notion of we have choices in every possible term. And it's the antithesis of being the victim mentality, right? Yeah. Again, back to my healthcare example, those Rome physicians didn't say, man, I'm a victim of this system and I'm just going to let them take more of our money and I'm going to continue to see more patients that I know I'm not doing a good job for. They said, I have a choice to fix this.
Yeah.
Right. And that knowing that you've got choices in every turn. And even if you're making a choice to stay in that crappy environment,
yeah,
you are making that choice. And so I think that humility, that conviction, and also never letting that victim mentality creep into your brain because it's just so paralyzing for every aspect. And that, I mean, that you talk about, that victim mentality goes, it's in healthcare, it's in leadership, it's in our political environment that we're in. I mean, you can take that one 6 ways to Tuesday and run with that. Maybe that's your next podcast topic.
Well, maybe we'll have you back in a couple of weeks to talk about that, Scott. hey, Coach, take us home. What's your takeaway?
Yeah. So my takeaways, I mean, we go in a couple of different things, like the balance between conviction and humility, I think is big, but just the acknowledgement that you don't have all the answers, but that when you make a decision, that's where the conviction comes in. Because I think that's that's the balance for me, is like being humble up until that decision and then just being rock solid in making that decision, but still being open to other options or alternative solutions as that decision unravels before your eyes.
Yeah.
Like it.
For you, Scott?
Yeah. I would echo everything that you said, Josh. You know, I think being able to go into a dark room knowing that you're not sure people will follow, but seeing them follow, I think is one of the most fulfilling things any leader can experience. And that's 90% of the battle, is being able to kind of get over your own fears to take those steps and take those calculated risks. Yeah, I've enjoyed the conversation, guys.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Anything? Any last words?
Such fantastic conversation all over the place, and I think the biggest thing is that it's just being certain in moving forward when you're doing it. Right, I could dive into talking about decision making and choice, but I think when it comes down to it, the biggest gift that we have as humans is choice, and recognizing that like we are always executing on the choice. Just be intentional and conscious about what it is.
Love it. Yeah, using the resources at our disposal to make the best decision possible, knowing that it might be the wrong one, but if it is, then you roll with the punches. Awesome. All right. Thank you guys. Appreciate it, Scott, for joining us, and we'll see you next week on Truth Seekers.
Thank you all.